Good morning, everyone. It's Louisa Munson from the Barefoot Broadcast. I had to look at my screen then to know where I was from. I'm joined once again by Rosanna Louisa, who, where are you today, Rosanna? At home?
I am at home, yes.
I know you've been on tour, haven't you? So
yeah, I do occasionally go off to meet clients and work with them. So yeah, I've had a few stays in hotels recently.
Yeah, well, welcome back. It's nice to see you once again. We got the Global Nobles joining us from Lisbon, saying, "Yay, bom dia, todos from Lisbon." So it's really nice to have you back. It's been a while, isn't it, since we've chatted? A few weeks, or is it? It might even be a month. I'm not sure, but
I've missed you.
I've missed you too. And yeah, so we're talking about. I was wondering what to talk about, and the word trust kept coming into my mind, and I couldn't work out why. Then I realized that our speaker just behind our computer actually is made by a company called Trust. So I think it was like going on in my mind, like subliminally.
Subliminal messaging.
But I was thinking, yeah, I'd love to talk about trust with somebody. And you really came to mind because you know, in our past conversations, you've spoken about the deep levels of surrender that you've needed, where you've had to trust in life. And I thought, right, okay, let's give Rosanna a call.
Well, I have to be honest. Trust is something that I really struggle with. And I think it is notorious for anyone who's experienced narcissistic abuse in any way, shape or form. But I experienced it from childhood with parents, one covert narcissist and one grandiose. So yeah, I was a bit daunted by the question because I was like, oh, am I really the person to speak to you about this? But then I thought, well, actually, when you struggle with trust, you're probably the best person to speak to, or one of the better people to speak to, because at first I was like, oh, this is a big question. I don't know how I'm going to answer this. And also, as you say, I've spoken a lot about this subject around the houses in other podcasts that we've done together. So yeah, I was kind of like, what more can I say about it? This will be interesting.
Well, I want to go back, if that's okay. You said, you know, like if you've grown up with narcissists from childhood, it's very difficult to have trust. So you mentioned you had a covert narcissist and a grandiose. Was it grandiose?
Yes,
you said,
yeah.
How could, like, if there was a definition of what each of those is and does, what could you share with us?
Okay, so for me personally, a covert narcissist is the most, or connecting with a covert narcissist is the most insidious experience, particularly if it's in the form of one of your parents. Because as the name suggests, it is very covert. It's secretive. It's displaying the type of person that is very trustworthy, is quite angelic, is the type of person that might appear to be a bit more fly on the wall, a bit more background. They often disguise themselves in the form of being the helper and the people pleaser on the surface of things. So to everybody else, the experience of this individual is, oh, they're amazing, they're such an angel, they're so loving, compassionate, empathic. But it's all a show. It's all learned behaviours that they've picked up because there isn't any authenticity in that. So the abject difference between your personal experience and what you experience other people relating to that person as makes you feel like you're going crazy, makes you doubt yourself and mistrust yourself. And of course, if you start learning to mistrust yourself as a child, then trusting anyone in life becomes really difficult and challenging.
Sure.
And so, yeah, on the flip side, the grandiose narcissist is the one that likes to be the life and soul of the party, the one who demands validation for everybody, the one who needs to be seen, the one who needs to be the leader and not the follower. Their word goes, their view and opinion is the only one that exists. Everything is black or white. And they can be, the most charming and the most endearing and the most fun to be around. Because again, that's learned behavior in order to get people looking at them, following them. They can also be extremely talented. My father was not a great musician, but he was a good musician, and he was also a very good singer. So, whenever there were family gatherings, he was quite often the center of attention. So yeah, once again, they put other people in the experience of adoring them to a certain standpoint of view, but then they often have this flip side whereby they can be extremely argumentative, so things can go from 0 to 100 within 10 minutes. Our family gatherings, looking back, were quite frightening, because as a child, you'd be in an environment where everybody's laughing, joking, there's singing, there's dancing, and all of a sudden 2 of the brothers are at each other's throats, and there's plates flying. So yeah, the grandiose character, narcissistic character, can be extremely difficult to get on with, and it feels like walking on eggshells, because you never quite know when things can change and will change, and they'll change on a dime within minutes. What they can have to say to you can be extremely undermining at a very core level, or destabilizing at a core level. And then around them they get the flying monkeys, which are the people that are trained to do their bidding, both for the covert and the grandiose. And my experience of my parents, one being covert and one being grandiose, they played this extremely intricate dance together, and actually supported one another to get the validation that they both needed. And it worked quite well for them. I mean, there was a lot of drama for them. There was a lot of huge arguments, but in a nutshell, that is the covert and the grandiose narcissist.
I mean, that's quite a good description, and there are aspects of that I relate to. I can definitely relate to. No, I mean, I'm sure I know Sarah is saying, wow, I can relate to this. Boom. She also said, yay, good morning, I made it. Owen's joining us as well, saying, hola everyone. I'm sure Owen knows the narcissistic types of people, because I know we've had different conversations. And it's interesting that you say it can start. Oh, and we've also got Azrael Clark joining us as well. Hi, Azrael. How are you?
Hi, Azrael.
So, yeah, I can see that. I guess I recognise your description from family dynamics. With like these situations that would come on in a moment, and also like that energy of walking over eggshells. I wonder if that's a normal experience for everybody, or whether I've just had the same similar, not as bad as you, but a similar experience to you in my own childhood.
I think we live in a narcissistically abusive society. It's systemic. Right. I think there are levels of narcissism, and let's face it, we all have an element of it. Otherwise, if we didn't, when we are in a situation where we are, potentially about to be mortally wounded, be it emotionally, mentally, or physically, we wouldn't be able to preserve ourselves. So there is no non-narcissistic individual. So it's, we just consider it as ratings. Everybody's got an element. But, not everybody has narcissistic personality disorder.
And is that where you're making everything about yourself all the time, to the detriment of the people around you? Almost like, when I think of it, I always think of a sort of vampiric energy, where somebody is using manipulation to get your energy, either in a very sort of like direct way or in a very hidden way, and subversive way. I don't know if that's a good definition.
Certainly, narcissistic abuse includes those kind of behaviours, and includes that kind of or emanates from that kind of character, personality.
Yeah.
Professor Sam Vaknin is a narcissistic, has narcissistic personality disorder, has been diagnosed with it, and speaks a lot on the subject. So for anyone who's really interested in this, I suggest you go there. He's very prevalent on YouTube. But one of the ways that he describes narcissistic personality disorder is that they are vacant. They are empty shells. There is no empathy. There is no compassion. It is like a higher reasoning mind without any kind of form of emotion except that which identifies with validation and needs constant validation, like we need food and water.
Yeah, that is the definition I was looking for, because I know that some of those things that I've experienced in my own childhood and understood from other people's childhood, I know that their parents and sort of greater family could experience empathy. So that's a really, really good definition, you know, that sort of empty shell.
Now, it is important to note that several times you can find somebody with narcissistic personality disorder and they've learned how to feign empathy and compassion. So yeah, that is something to be aware of. They're great actors. To be
playing lots of parts.
Yes, yeah. And there isn't much consistency. The only consistency is that they will play out their dramas in line with their need for receiving validation. And as soon as somebody begins to uncover them, that's when the nasty plays come out.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ooh, we've got quite a few people joining us today. So Bob Wanger's joining us with a good morning. Carl is saying, why does this happen? What went wrong? I think that's a really good question I'd like us to come back to, actually.
Will I be on for a bit of it later?
Oh, yeah. Are you okay if Carl comes on and joins us as well?
I would love Carl to come on. Why not? Come play, Carl.
Azrael saying, I'm good. Louisa, hope you are really well too. Yeah, thank you. I am. Thank you. Owen is saying, I'm relating to this also. Azrael's also saying, hey, Louis. Oh,
that one.
Times. And Vivian is saying, finally got here. Bon dia, ladies. Bon dia, back to you, Vivian. So that's a good question. And I'm sure Carl's got things to add when he comes on shortly. But why does this happen? What went wrong? I mean, when you were describing them as an empty shell, and also that the really clever ones learn how to feign empathy or kindness or compassion to kind of reel somebody in. What I get there is that's kind of quite mean behavior, and that the person doing it must be actually quite hurt.
Yeah.
And they might not even realize that they're hurt. You know, they might scoff in your face that we are saying, wow, what happened to you, man, to want to do this? Well, weird way, because there's so many different ways of getting validation, right? You can get validation from just participating and joining people with an open heart. So what do you think went wrong?
I believe and I understand from many experts who have taught on this, psychologists, etc., that basically there's been a break in their development of their personality at a very young age. So they have been significantly traumatized to the point where there has been a separation of self, and then that self has almost been discarded in favor of a construct of self that is not always the same.
Wow.
So with somebody who isn't experiencing narcissistic personality disorder or BPD or any kind of the main five that I talked about in the DSM, we get to a point in our lives where we know ourselves to a certain extent, and we're pretty steady in our character and personality and our core values and beliefs. Being somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder, and this is my interpretation of it, is like living life on shifting sand. and the only thing they have to cling on to is everybody else's validation of them. And so as soon as they get any sense of being criticised or undermined or not lauded over, everything crumbles and they go into an extreme panic mode. I saw something the other day, it was on TikTok actually, and it was someone stating that the worst individual that somebody with narcissistic personality disorder can be around is somebody with ADHD. Because people with ADHD are like, you present to them a plan and they're like, oh yeah, good plan, but what about this, and how about if we go there and look for anything? And it's, you know, they're all outside, they're all, you know, they're just loving life and feeding off loads of influences and inspirations, and life is exciting and it's intriguing and it's an adventure, right? And anyone with narcissistic personality disorder it's all got to be about me. Your focus has to be on me. You have to trust me. You know, you can't question me. It's my way or the highway. And that's true whether they're grandiose or covert. It's just that the way that they manage their response and the way that they play out a drama following realizing that you're not trusting them is different. But the impetus to then accuse you or demoralize you or get flying monkeys to gang up on you and isolate you, and subject you to, you know, even persecuting you in the workplace and undermining you in your career. They'll go even to those lengths to punish you for not thinking that they're absolutely fabulous. And that all derives from that sense of, unless you think I'm fabulous, I don't exist.
Wow, that is indeed complex. I mean, I've noticed I've done quite a few videos on Pluto and Chiron on my astrology channel, which really talks about trauma and core hurts from childhood. And lots of people in the comments have spoken about their family dynamics, and you know, there's all these different acronyms. I've been looking them up, and they're all different types of narcissistic personality disorders. There's a complex one, there's all these different ones, and I've been really surprised over the last few weeks, but it's obviously a really big thing. And it was interesting when you were saying, you know, they'll try and run you down and pull you down. I think one of the worst things that I've observed and experienced actually is where somebody is trying to get you to question your own reality. Now obviously
Gaslighting.
They can't do that. They can't do that unless you participate in that. But if you're quite a sort of like naive, wide-eyed, doe-eyed person that takes everyone at face value, it's very easy to start actually thinking, oh, did I really do that? Wow. Oh. So it's interesting. That's really good intel actually, you know, about being ADHD. I'm guessing there are certain types of people that they like to lock in on as well. Most likely the doe-eyed, naive people.
You'd think that, right?
Oh, go on.
I think there are several types of people that they like to latch onto, and I think that might be one of them. I think people like that would very well serve them as a flying monkey. But in terms of going through a narcissistically abusive relationship, like a romantic one, I think what they are often primarily attracted to is power.
Oh.
So people who go through narcissistic abuse, and I've worked with many of them to help them recover, one of the major questions they ask themselves is, how could I have got myself in this position? How could I have been so stupid? How could I have been so weak? But actually the opposite is often true. And this is corroborated for me by the types of people that I've worked with. They've been highly intelligent, highly successful, or at least they started out that way, or highly capable in life. But it's just so, it can be so subtle in the first instance after the love bombing phase where things start to change. It's not suddenly in your face. So that's the first thing to consider. It's like a quiet dripping tap. The changes happen like a quiet dripping tap. And we all know, I think, or can imagine how quickly a bath can fill with just a dripping tap.
Yeah.
So, you know, before you know it, you're drowning and you're too deep in and you've got no one to save you. I digressed a little bit there. Can't quite remember your question.
Like the kinds of people that attract the attention of these people. And obviously, you know, we are going to move, you know, I took this off the question of trust, but it's interesting, you know, we are going through times where there's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't trust. And so, so I think it's good to get this all out. And yeah, I'm pretty sure most of the people in this conversation, I know many of them personally, have experienced this kind of challenge, have experienced this kind of dynamic where somebody love bombs them for quite some time. And then all of a sudden there's this really quite dramatic switch. And there might be a couple of like when you look retrospectively, there might be a couple of little moments where you thought, oh, hang on, is that out? And then all of a sudden it's
well, I actually think this is a perfect thing to talk about when we're talking about trust, because there are various forms of trust, but the primary one is trusting self.
Yeah.
And that is what this kind of experience begins to chip away at. And I think, first of all, they are attracted to people who are quite empowered, or at least confident, and display an empowerment, even if it isn't an authentically felt and experienced empowerment, is one that's presented, that kind of like fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people might feel confident many times in the day, but it might not be constant either.
Yeah, or they might feel, you know, some of the most confident people I have known in my lifetime have been those with crippling self-esteem and self-worth problems behind the scenes. Yeah. So yes, what can be projected isn't necessarily true, and that's true of narcissists.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's this sense of, at the moment, I think narcissism is the new pandemic, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
it's the main one.
It does sound like it.
Yeah, and it's systemic. You know, you see it in all the heads of states. You see it in, you know, important people, CEOs of corporations. You see corporations employing managers who are narcissistic, and you know, there is a lot of bullying that goes on in the workplace, and also in governments upon their people at the moment. So yeah, trust is a big issue, and you know, this gaslighting that goes on. You're right, there is a sudden switch within, going back to personal relationships now, after the love bombing. That's how they trauma bond us, because they love bomb, and then there is this sudden, unexpected, humongous change that basically sends your brain into panic. You know, you're suddenly in this, you know, this sense of cognitive dissonance, where you can't quite believe what is happening because there's no reason for it usually.
Yes.
And then you start questioning your reality because there's no reason for it. So you start going down this wormhole of, what did I miss? What did I do? Oh my God, it's me. And then you start trying to morph yourself into whatever you can possibly put your finger on to morph yourself into, so that you can take it back to the love bombing. And that is the first, it's like the shock tactic, and that creates this trauma bond.
Wow.
And once the trauma bond has been established, which is a bit like Stockholm syndrome, you know, where you're like, you almost deflect your trust to that individual at this point, because you're like, I want everything that we have back. I need everything that we have back, right? And so then you give them your trust. You become vulnerable voluntarily, because you're like, help me do whatever it is that gets us back to where we were, right?
Yeah.
And then that's when they start.
I remember having those thoughts, actually. I've had those thoughts at different parts in my life. This is really fascinating. I just want to read out the comments that people are bringing in, and then maybe bring Carl on as well. You're really on fire today, may I say.
Oh, bless you. I think it was the fact that you told me there might be trolls. I was like, let me at them.
Yes. So
the fire under me.
Sarah's saying, that person pretending to be empathetic, can they be seen easier by how over the top they are with their display of supposed empathy? Good question. Yes, they like the challenge of the strong ones. Very interesting. We've got some very strong and empathic people here that are watching us. This is why I think this show is kind of for all of us, isn't it? You know, psychopathic vampires, energy drainers from Owen. Bob is saying, agree, Sarah, with the over-top empathy in a narcissistic. I was in a relationship with, hang on, let me start this again. Sorry, Bob. I agree, Sarah. The over-the-top empathy in a narcissistic. I was in a relationship. Oh, I can't read this out properly. Sorry, Bob. But what I'm getting is he was in a relationship which was sickening when you know the reality and control. Now a minister in a church. That's fascinating. So many light bulbs going on right now from the Global Nobles. You've described perfectly a previous intense working relationship. And I always wondered how I started as confident and capable and by the end felt feeble. I had a working relationship just like that. And it, I actually was off work for a while with it. They're very difficult. From day to day, I never knew if I was amazing or awful. That's really feeling for you there. Narcissism is getting daylighted. I love that, Bob. That. Thank you so much. Right, let's bring Mr. M on. And what have you got any more comments around that, you know, from what other people have brought in, Rosanna?
Yes, what was it Sarah was saying about, can you put her comment on again? Sure. The one about empathy.
That person pretending
to be empathetic. Can they be seen easier by how over the top they are with the display of supposed empathy? I guess it depends on the individual. Some are more artful and skillful at pretending than others. Certainly I have known some people that are very successful at portraying it. But where you can know whether or not to trust them, let's bring the whole trust back in.
Yeah.
Is what's the feeling you get?
Yeah.
When you're with somebody who is compassionate and empathetic or empathic, genuinely so, you get a feeling, don't you? You get that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That feels good. I feel seen. I feel heard. I feel understood. Or I recognize that person, you know, if you're in a group scenario, that person there feels seen, heard, understood, feels like they matter.
Yeah.
And, you know, any emotion that they might be displaying, it feels genuine. You're drawn into it. With somebody with MPD, you're not. So the visual might look okay, might look all right, but there isn't that. Something feels off. Something will always feel off. But if you're some way down the road of narcissistic abuse yourself, you will simply question yourself, you'll dismiss it, you'll mistrust yourself and go, oh, that's just stupid, I'm just imagining it, or it's my previous experiences that have made me paranoid and therefore I'm now projecting, right? The displays of somebody with NPD who is manifesting or trying to manifest emotion will leave you cold, will leave you feeling empty, will leave you questioning. So I think that's really key to notice. But some, as I say, are more artful than others.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sarah's saying, I suppose if it feels over the top to me, that's my sign. Interesting that you say that, Sarah, because I can think of somebody that I felt a sudden switch from and a lot of judgment from. And at the start of our relationship, they were over giving all the time for things I didn't want, didn't need, didn't ask for, but kept giving and giving and giving and giving. And when I didn't want things, they seemed to get a little bit shirty. It was almost as if that was their way of trying to force their way in, maybe. And because I just genuinely, or maybe at that time really felt, oh, maybe it's me that's being not very into receivership. Maybe I should open myself up a bit more. And then about 9 months down the line, it was like, because all of a sudden this person used all the gifts as a way to have a problem, a really big problem. But I did actually have a feeling of something's not quite right here, but I didn't listen to it. So yeah, that's interesting that you say that, Sarah. And Azrael's just added, I agree, the global nobles. I'm having these issues at work at the moment. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that as well. That's awful. Let's bring Carl on as well and see where this goes. So, Carl, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, please. What?
No, I was just asking.
Okay. Yes, for sure. It reminds me of.
I can't hear. Oh,
That's ridiculous, isn't
there
it?
you go.
Sorry,
You've
I've got
sound
two
now.
sets of headphones on because I was listening and working, and then I thought, okay, I can't not. It's the usual situation. I really want to add something, if I may. and the first thing that I was reminded of was when you were pregnant, and we went to a for the first time, and we went to a hospital appointment, and we were sat in the waiting room. And there was a poster on the wall.
Yeah, there was.
Is your partner? It's like a checklist. Is your partner doing this, and this? Like 10 things. If you've answered yes to a lot of these questions, your partner might be an abusive
Narcissist.
It didn't say narcissist. I don't think it wasn't common.
Gaslighter.
I think it was an abusive. You might be in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I hope she doesn't see that poster. It was.
We actually did go through it and laugh, didn't we?
Well, we did.
Because you did take
and on a
loads of
more
those
serious
boxes.
note, that's and this is maybe from a sort of more yangy point of view. I'm like all up for. Well, if I'm a narcissist, I need to be told basically. And I think Rosanna, I think you said, didn't you? We all have the tendency. It's there in us, and some are acting it out. Some are not, and also from another point of view. I mean, on Monday the show theme I was hoping for was like, what are human beings really? What is our archetypal state? And this is almost the opposite of that, isn't it? This is a great reference point because this is all that we're really not. I would say all that you described this morning is the traumatic state we've ended up in, which is the mirror image or the negative photographic image of what we truly are. Possibly we've reached that point, have we not?
That's interesting.
Or what we were innately supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
We have I think we have a sort of pristine archetypal nature blueprint, and we're so far away from it, and we've been traumatized out of it, and this is what's happened. And then the problem with this, of course, it's like that bucket of crabs, isn't it, where anyone trying to get back to their pristine nature is trying to get out of the bucket of crabs, and everyone's just like, and then you look back and you go, stop fucking pulling me back into the bucket, and you start whacking people behind you as well, and you fall into the bucket, and you're back at Narcissist Central or just Dysfunction HQ in the bucket again. So it's very helpful and horrible as well. It's really horrible what you're describing, and that people go through this, and from a male masculine point of view, I want to be told. If I'm being like that, I want to be told, and I want to do something about it, and I want to stop other people doing it.
That is the sign that you aren't.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So you might have the behaviors.
Yeah, I do. I know I do. I know I score highly.
We all do. We all do at different times, don't we?
Yeah.
And it goes back to what I was saying about preservation. Right?
Yeah.
We all do, and we all should have an element of it. Because we're designed to preserve ourselves, and there will be moments where you need to be, self-centric in order to come out of a situation. When we're at rock bottom, we can't help anyone else because our cup is empty. So we need to be focusing on self. But there is a difference between needing to focus on oneself or standing up for oneself in a certain situation, and actually consciously needing to undermine and chip away at somebody else's sanity, stability, security, in order for you to be feeling empowered by knocking them down and destroying their life. Because somebody with MPD will need to destroy your life and eventually get to a point where they can discard you.
Whilst feeling better for having done that.
Yeah, because that's the end game.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And they're still keeping you around, and they haven't got to the end game.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah.
I'm convinced that's why a lot of, and it's interesting that Carl talked about yang energy. A lot of masculines tend to display more narcissistic tendencies. And I think that's the driver behind a lot of masculines needing to go with significantly younger women, because it's a lot about status. And then, in later years, as the women age, they become irrelevant to them because they don't perceive them as status building any longer. So, elder married women get discarded in the end by somebody who's gotten NPD.
Because they want to be the best. That's really, really clear. I'm really taken by what you just shared there. If they're still keeping you around, it's because they haven't reached their end game or their end point. Which is,
or because you haven't uncovered them. They don't feel that you've uncovered them. You've completely bought into the script and the scenario and this fictitious reality that they are amazing, so you're still feeding them. Going back to the trust thing,
when you sorry, can I just ask, like, if they're still keeping you around, it's because they haven't reached the end point. But what happens if you ditch them and you say, right, I'm not keeping you around now? Is that when all the big displays start happening?
Be afraid, be very afraid. If you're out there or watching and thinking of discarding a narcissist, a true narcissist, then you need to play the game. You need to do it covertly. You need to do it subtly. You need to set up your life before you leave as much as possible. And it's not always possible, because they're very sensitive to realizing when they've been uncovered, when they start to notice when you notice that your mask has slipped, because they have trained themselves to be extremely observant in this area. And they are very sentient in being able to feel and perceive the subtle signs of you're no longer buying into their play. And as soon as they sense that, that's when they will, start turning nasty with all their tactics, such as maligning your character amongst the people that you know, and in so doing separating you from your nearest and dearest, so you don't have a support network, which of course has the effect of making you crumble sooner and faster. And then once you're doing that, you're playing into their game, because then they up the ante even more, tell even more lies about you, tell people, how you are basically like them. But they won't say it in that way. They will project everything that they are onto you, so you become the narcissist, and you start thinking you are the narcissist.
Yes. Do you know what? This is reminding me of the life and times of the she-devil, was it? There was a program years ago, and it had that Pam, what's her name in it?
Pam Ferris.
And she played, was it called?
Yeah, it's Dennis Potter. Dennis Potter drama.
It was, I remember watching it as quite a young child. I must have been about 11 or 12. And it was about this spurned woman who reeled in his wife and basically bit by bit sort of destroyed her, and took great fun and pleasure at it. And I remember being absolutely horrified reading that, how it all was going. It was really gross. We've got Sarah saying, wow, Rosanna, you could write a book on this if you haven't already. And I agree. I
am writing a book on this. I've been writing it for 5 years.
Oh my God, get it out.
I'm like, oh no, I need to write a bit more, change it, tweak it.
This is really good. You missed
when it's done, it'll be my life's work, I think.
and I think it would be very helpful. So before I asked you, just to go over that last bit again, you were saying getting on to trust. So what was it you wanted to share about trust and how that fits in?
So if you suspect that you have a narcissist in your life, then the best way that you can, I feel personally, angle yourself into a position where they're less likely to want to destroy you is to play the game, be dishonest, and as much as possible help them to feel that they can trust you. because the moment that they feel that they can't trust you is when they become the scorpion.
That's a strategy, a coping strategy, right?
Yeah, so that's a coping strategy. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, that reminds me of like as a kid, like growing up with red hair, and it was much brighter when I was a child, and I was quite skinny and I had a limp, really obvious one, and so I got a bit bullied at school, and my mum would just say, "Oh, rise above it, love," and then when my mum would walk out the room, my dad would take me aside and say, "You have to become the bully." And then there was this one day where, or a few probably times, there was this one significant moment where I bullied somebody back, and I guess in the moment I did enjoy it. It stopped immediately after that. There was no more bullying at all. They just kind of were a bit like, "Stay away from her. She's mental. She's a nut job."
Crazy redhead.
Yeah, yeah, playing it completely into those stereotypes I didn't want to play into. But there's something kind of icky about it, that if you've, like the whole deception game, that you have to go into that deception to be able to get free of it, is that's a bit.
I'm so not comfortable about that.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping for a different answer, I'll be honest.
But at the same time, obviously, if you're in a life-threatening and preserving situation, of course you must do that.
You need to understand how bad these things can get.
Right.
Fair enough.
And I'm guessing you've seen the results of these times. I mean, I've worked with a client that was stalked, and who needed to get their own arsenal out of like their lock away. They needed to use guns at some point. I've heard of different scenarios, but not really worked that closely with people, to find out more of the emotional and psychological things going on. And I know somebody else who's been stalked for so many months, and I can't imagine what that's like. So what do you have to get them into your trust?
Let's paint a scenario. Say a married woman is living with her husband who is full on narcissistic, abusive, and there is financial control on top of everything else, and she has been convinced to not have a career, so she has no financial means of her own, and she realizes that her narcissistically abusive husband can completely destroy her, isolate her, or continue to worsen the isolation between her and her family and her friends, so that she has no support if she continues down the road of displaying to her husband that he cannot be trusted, and she doesn't trust him, and she doesn't love him anymore. She's fallen out of love, right? That's, if she does that, she's in a very precarious position.
Yeah.
So what can happen is it can escalate to being physical, and it does. It's not just that it can happen, it often does. It often ends up in that space. So we're talking about potentially life or death circumstances. And believe you me, when you are in that position, you will do what it takes. You will lie if you have to. You will squirrel away documents. You will photocopy documents and keep them in a safety deposit box, or give them to a trusted individual with the foresight of, at some point we're going to be going through divorce, and he's going to be hiding everything. And making it financially look like he's on the breadline, even though he could be a CEO right now of a very successful company. You have to start thinking ahead and thinking like they think. You have to start being strategic. You have to start looking at yourself and your life as a business. And you have to disconnect from the emotional aspect of it if you want to be able to survive. And this is coming from somebody, I've been in 2 narcissistically abusive marriages, and the second one I ended up in a refuge, and at one point I had a knife in my hand while he's chasing me around the kitchen. Shit happens, and it gets very real very fast. And I pride myself on being authentic as I can be, as loving and caring and empathetic and helpful as I can be. But as much as I can be the light, I can be the darkest motherfucker that you ever met in your life if you're going to come at me with a knife.
Yes.
You know?
And isn't it good to have those choices, to know that you'll go there?
Yeah. You know, I choose to be the good. But I have it within me not to be.
Yeah.
You know, I will manifest towards you how you manifest towards me. So yeah, if I'm going to be backed up into a corner, nice as I am, I can be an evil bitch, and I'm not afraid to say it. And I think that's probably because of the experiences that I've had in my life. You know,
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that. You know,
Yeah.
honestly, and I'm sorry for earlier on, because the first time I ever heard about this, it was a woman who told me that she'd been married to a person of this type, and I think I was really kind of, I'm not gaslighty about it, but just a bit spiritual bypassy. I just didn't recognize the scale of it, which you've just kind of reminded me about there. And what, you know, again, some sort of a blokey, yangy, fix-it point of view, it's like, one of my guilty pleasures is watching paedophiles being beaten up on Twitter. And I would I would also like to see this for these guys, mainly guys, right? Not only, but, you know, especially when men exert their power over women in this way, I find it really repulsive. And I would like to see them get their just desserts. And I know it's not the answer. It's not gonna be the healthy, long-term, functional answer to this. But I mean, given that, you know, the strategies and survival mechanisms you've talked about, it wouldn't be out of place at the moment, would it, to have some emergency situations that other men who get wind of men behaving like this deal with it and sort it out, because that's what's needed in the first instance, isn't it? I suppose the problem is, if we live in a society where it's not legitimized openly, but there's a conspiracy to have it happen because everyone has a touch of it about them, so we're all kind of hiding it from each other and playing into it a little bit with each other because we won't have it out in the open. Because, of course, who's going to own up to that? It's like, you know, it's like a paedophile trying to get help, isn't it? They're not going to do it, are they? If there's people around like me who are gleeful about their demise. So that's part of this problem, isn't it? Is how does that person start to get help if they are helpable? Because that was another thing I learned, is some people are irredeemable in this regard, aren't they? But for those who might be redeemable, or at least be warned by the rest of society that if you do this, you're going to face the most tough consequences. So go be somewhere else, away from us. If you know, if you can't be functional, don't be here. That would be one way of dealing with it. But we have to get it to some degree out in the open first, don't we? And I don't know how we break ranks like that. You must have thought about that a lot, Rosanna. How do we break ranks collectively such that we can begin to do something about it, so that all of this doesn't exist so much behind closed doors?
I think it's perfect that you mentioned men policing men. I think throughout history, the only time, and this is probably a very biased opinion, but in my opinion, the only time where, you know, women have felt protected and safe is when men like yourself rise up and go, do you know what, we're not going to take this bullshit from men anymore. I think, you know, we touched on systemic narcissism. I think what's going on in the world today is government leaders and governors as a whole trying to create factions between men and women, black and white. Let's separate them so they're not powerful. If they're, you know, infighting amongst themselves, then they can't rise up against the real enemy, which is narcissistic abuse on a grand motherfucking scale.
I can see that. I can totally.
You know, we can see that through COVID. We can see it through the various pandemics. You know, it was all about control. And that to me is narcissism on, you know, a grand scale.
And there's a whole kind of hall of mirrors, isn't there, for any man who might want to stand up against it with other men. It's like you have to run the gauntlet of being a far right, misogynistic, sexist, patriarchal bastard just because you want to protect the women in your community. I mean, that is a sad situation, isn't it?
Yeah. And, you know, there's so many small tendrils spreading out in so many different directions. And one of them is this whole trans argument where, you know, even those women who are pro-trans are being told that they're anti-trans because they don't want to entertain legislation whereby any man can claim that they're trans, albeit they may not have been through an operation, they may not even want to feign any kind of look of being female, yet they're going to walk into a female toilet and say that they are they feel female, therefore they are, you know. So that, yeah, there's a lot of difficulties in the moment for women, and I think, yes, women should be standing up for women. I'm not saying that we should deflect our responsibility, but we should all be standing together, and I think it's particularly powerful when men stand up for women and say to other men, this is not reasonable, particularly in this day and age where anyone can have a platform and say anything. And it seems to me that most of the time those who are censored are those who are trying to do good.
And when you might, when you can let your conscience get the better of you, mightn't you? Because that's what we're up against at the moment, it seems. Again, on a grand scale, it's like my conscience is telling me one thing, but the virtue signaling forces of social media are telling me that's a disgusting point of view. You know, that I feel so strongly about something, and I don't want this to happen in my society or my community. And the messaging is, oh, you're a bad person for thinking that. And that's maybe just the crunch we're coming to, isn't it? Is where, for better or for worse, people do have to sink in or stand up, to mix metaphors, into their conscientious and intuitive selves, much more than the signal to conformist, conditioned messaging that is so sort of kind of prevalent and powerful as well, isn't it? Of course.
Can I just what occurs to me, it's interesting that you mentioned about paedophiles, because right now there's also a narrative that you can't really speak about paedophiles because they're really protected, and
they're no longer paedophiles, they're MAPs.
Yes, they're minor attracted
persons.
So
something like that.
So for things, you know, like where we might have stood up to protect children, if we do that, we're now infringing on somebody's journey.
It depends where
to express
fair,
themselves,
doesn't it?
and that could also happen with people with narcissistic personality disorders.
Oh yeah,
because if they get protected,
well, they are. Aren't
well,
they,
I mean, they're
Rosanna?
at the top, aren't they? But I mean,
well, I think you'll find that they often coexist.
Yeah.
Because remember, we talked about how somebody with narcissistic personality disorder is kind of like they fractionize themselves. Maybe I've just made up a word. But like they separate themselves.
Yeah.
And they're lacking in empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
And they're almost like this robotic mental mind and body without the heart, right? And so they view sex as a means of empowering themselves, and, you know, worst case scenario, they use children to do
but in
that.
any case, it would be at the expense of another being, wouldn't it? Whatever their age. That is the profile we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's indiscriminate. And of course, children are an easy target. So, you know, you also see different levels of MPD. So you can get somebody with MPD who is extremely successful, and somebody who is the other end of the spectrum, you know, extremely not successful and can't maintain work. So yeah, there are various different levels, but I think particularly at the high end, where we see, you know, certain elites, certain secret bodies who are full of them, you know, there is a big paedophilic network going on there.
And it seems very important to me to resist this at a community level, because it's as if you try and fight it out at that elite level, you don't stand a chance, do you? Because you're not part of that club, and you wouldn't want to be anyway. So that's not a place to be dealing with this. The place to be dealing with this is in our own local communities, isn't it? I think that's what occurs to me. And we've fallen for the illusion that we're governed from on high, when in fact our lives are local, and they can be even more local if we empower ourselves to do that and say what we're up for and not up for in our locally lived lives. That seems to be the right model. And, you know, all these other kind of perverts and weirdos who are doing weird stuff all over the world always did, probably always will, can go and be doing that somewhere else whilst we live our lives as we want to, more locally and in a way that we see fit, healthy and functional.
That's all very well, except if you
They're all in our
recognise that those elites have an agenda and they are the ones who are making the laws. And you know, if they impose a law whereby, you know, we have to, you know, or and if we don't, then we have to deal with the police at our door, respect maps and allow them to be in and amongst our community, then what are we able to do then in the community unless we recognize that there is a global agenda going on that is all about controlling those who want to be able to, as you have mentioned, police our own communities and decide what is good and what is right within our communities and take action in that respect on that level. If we don't notice that there are bills being passed to impede us from being able to do that without getting into trouble or potentially getting into court or being taken to court or then being put in prison, then, you know, what have we got? I think we do need to recognise that it needs to be dealt with on a higher level as well. It's both. It's not one or the other.
But I think it's really important we don't fall for that manipulation, because that's a lot of that up high, as it were, abstracted lawmaking is saber rattling, isn't it? It's signalling, because for every, let's say, for every one person that gets hauled over the coals, who's a notable example at the moment? That is it Lawrence Fox, who seems to be putting himself in front of every vehicle of this kind to say, you know, we won't be policed in this way. There must be hundreds and thousands of other people who, if they do act locally and in their communities, will win by the end of it. But I do get it. I mean, the means by which the manipulation is taking place is immense, isn't it? And very powerful. And we have to keep remembering, it's just ridiculous. It's just like, these are just people trying it on, and they should be laughed at rather than feared. And the more laughing I think we can do at the ridiculousness of a lot of these capers, the better, quite frankly. But that's not to take you any less seriously, Rosanna, on what you're saying with that, because a lot of people are falling for, if you can't say that. It's a classic thing of our times, isn't it? Oh, you can't say that, you can't say that. So, well, I just said it. Calm down. We're all sat in the pub saying it. You can say it. You just said it. Keep saying it. All right. Don't worry about people saying you can't say it. If it's true for you, and if it's your truth, if it's your conscience and your intuition, and it's right for you, fucking well say it. And don't believe the nonsense about, oh, you can't say that, because that really winds me up when people say, oh, you can't say that.
I just want to bring in some comments from people watching. So Sarah's saying, at one time I became agoraphobic because of the demons unleashed on me for finally planning my escape and cutting off a narcissist. So, you know, what you're saying there, Rosanna, is absolutely true. And she also added, exactly, Rosanna, life manager mode, you know, so you have to go into how to keep yourself safe when you're trying to escape from somebody who does this. Bob's saying, best advice I got from a co-worker when that narcissist came out full blown was to get my own bank account now, saved me financially. Vivian saying, the world has lost its mind, maps indeed. And Azrael saying, maps, I feel this unminds the victims then. And I think that's a really good point, actually.
Sorry, what are maps again?
Minor attracted persons.
Oh, okay.
It's the new euphemistic term for paedophile.
Bollocks.
It's basically saying, Carl, that it's a type of sexuality, and if it's a natural type of sexuality, then they should be respected.
Okay. I mean, not okay, but like,
no.
You know, I mean, they're just, you know, really, there are so many people who just don't. The majority of people, I'm sure, in my heart, believe that I just don't fall for this. I mean, they know they're having it thrust upon them, like in every bloody conceivable sense of the phrase. But you know, the general will, the common sense of people is not up for this, and we have to trust and believe in that. I think in our own collective power. That what did you just say? That is absolute bollocks. Take your maps, and you know, self-pleasure yourself with it. because it's not for the rest of us.
I was going to bring this back to the whole idea of trust, but actually I'm just going to change the title of the show. So, any suggestions?
Much easier.
Trust.
What I think this should lead into is a part 2, where it'd be helpful if we could maybe talk about, how we could recognize these people, and also how we could maybe seek help when we realize we might be in trouble, and sort of like round this up. But I think maybe we come back another time and really talk about the trust side of it, because it is interesting. Like, that there is that scenario where, if you're being bullied, you have to become a bully to get over it. If you're being attacked by a narcissist, you have to employ some of their engineering, I guess, to work your own exit out and to manage it very succinctly. It might be why you hear of so many men that suddenly go home one day and find that the locks have been changed, or that like a woman has gone and left them with nothing. Sarah's saying, yes. Run. And Vivian is also saying, in comment to Azrael's comment about maps, that it undermines the victims. Vivian's right, it totally ignores the victims, this rewriting of the name. But yeah, I can't remember where I was going now, but
I was going to do a part 2 about noticing the signs. There has been some research that has been done on physical signs of, identifying a narcissist. So that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I imagine that it's like when we're playing cross-culturally, it can happen a lot easier. Like if you're in a relationship with somebody from a different place. I remember teaching at a college in southwest London for a while. I was teaching about coaching, and I had a load of women on my group, and they'd been sent for. It was like coaching for empowerment. And I had a load of women that were joining me who were migrated from like Pakistan and other places. And there was this woman who broke down one day, and she said, I'm pregnant. And I was like, wow, congratulations. How do you feel? And she said, I feel terrible. I can't talk to my mum. I can't talk to my family. I've been taken away from my family. My husband has my phone. I've got the only way I've got to communicate with my mum is the only person I've got to communicate with is with the medical team. She was completely on her own. And there's, for every person like that, there's probably hundreds of thousands of people like that, millions of people maybe around the world in different relationships. Because obviously, she wasn't able to mix with other people in the UK and to really, obviously I got through. I got a little chink, and I found out a little bit of what was going on for her. But yeah, she was very disempowered, and you don't think of it happening, but it obviously does happen.
Well, what you said, Rosanna, it's happening on a grand scale, isn't it? We don't like to think of these things, but this is hell. I mean, let's face it. From in my model of life, there's the world and there's life. Life is very beautiful. Life is good, and then there's all what we're actually living and what things have degenerated into, and this is exactly what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. My perception is it's more prevalent for women. It does happen to men. Men do get subjected to narcissistic abuse within what initially starts as a romantic relationship and ends up as hell. I have worked with a couple of them, and in some ways it's harder for them because the perception is, I think globally, just a general understanding of if you succumb to a narcissistic abusive relationship, then you are in somehow weaker than the rest of us, or more vulnerable. You become that way. You don't start out that way. So yeah, I think it's more prevalent for women. I heard a statistic the other day, which I haven't had time to confirm, but somebody was saying something like 200,000 women went missing last year.
Where? from the
I
UK.
don't know about whether or not the figure is real, but it certainly resonates for me that, you know, there are a lot of women going missing all the time.
Yeah. Yes, and in that scenario that I described with the woman that I was teaching in college, that makes real sense. I mean, she could have disappeared and nobody would have known it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's that side of the thing. There's that side of the equation. And then for those who, in some circumstances where the situation is extremely dire and they do fear for their life, or they do fear for repercussions upon their kids or their family members, they voluntarily disappear because they are less likely to, you know, be manipulated and controlled or subjected to frightening experiences if they can't be found. And if they can't be found, then the narcissistic abuser is probably less likely to find pleasure from, you know, trying to mess with their family, because it's really them that they want to affect. And if they can't see the result of what they are affecting, then they're liable to just move on to the next victim, because there isn't too much gratification in that. They need that gratification. They need to be able to, I think somebody said earlier, you know, vampirism, energy vampirism. Yes, absolutely. Not everybody who steals your energy is going to be narcissistic, but certainly that is one of the factors at play for somebody who is NPD. You know, they derive pleasure from it. They need that. It's their food. And if they can't see the visual effects of what it is they're doing to you, then they're going to get bored and move on.
Yeah.
And Sarah's right, isn't she? I mean, sorry to keep disappearing, but I've got good reasons. Run, you know, that's what we're learning, isn't it? It's coming back to trust and how to manage life, living life in this time of where we're at, you know, in this moment in history. Is to trust those instincts and get better at it. I mean, you can't do it overnight, can you? You can't just spot people who are bad for you and it's done. Like, you know, going to school, passing an exam. This is lifelong work, isn't it? In a way, a lot of us have spent a long time trying to get our act together to figure out what actually works, because it's such a dark age. I mean, that's another sign of these times, isn't it? It takes a really long time to figure stuff out because we're just wandering around in the dark and with so many disruptive forces at work. But to go in, at least going in the right direction, you know, towards the light is wonderful, isn't it? And I think Sarah's absolutely right. Like, bloody run.
So, what's the best way to wrap this show up then? Because I don't want to leave it on a, you know, like there are awful forces out there.
Well, there are also some beautiful. I mean, every good force is so much more powerful than all these bad forces, and to gravitate and find people. Like we're talking about this morning, you know, we have some sort of collective sense here, don't we, of people who want to get out of this mess and do something better with life, and to find more people and experiences like that.
Well, it's interesting what you were saying, Rosanna, that, you know, that's why not only do some people go missing, but also people go on the run where they can't be detected. And, you know, it's interesting you made the connection about the narcissistic powers that might run countries, because during that moment in time that you were talking about, the phenomenon of the pandemic, I know many people that were thinking of running, you know, and thinking, okay, I need to just lose my identity here and disappear because I don't want to be part of what these globalists want to put me through. I would be one of them. I would be like,
I'm considering it now.
And
land anyway.
Yeah. And it was
we
interesting.
Build a house on the ground.
Yeah, well, I mean, they do. It's interesting that you mentioned, you know, that some people squirrel away their I guess their details and stuff, you know, from their partners so they can escape. You know, there are people who have got bug out bags, haven't they? That in a moment's notice they can just go on the run. So interesting times that these are these prevalent themes. We've got a couple of more comments. I'm not sure. I can't figure out where this has come in. Never heard such a load of
I
rubbish.
think it was maps.
Oh,
Maps
yeah.
reference. I'm hoping it was.
Yes, I think it is. The victims are defenseless.
I thought that was our troll for a minute there. I was like,
No.
Vivian was saying nice things earlier.
The interesting thing, the troll, this goes to show just how interesting the trolls are actually, because within 5 minutes, within about a minute of each other, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 different identities pop up.
Oh, you've had it this morning?
Yeah.
Oh,
not with any nastiness, but obviously, you know, like
a bit of mischief.
a bit of mischief. And so I just like banned them straight off. But they
Right.
came back with another personality, and another personality.
Wow. Could have been quite a useful demonstration.
Yeah.
I mean, in defense of trolls, in a way, it's good that people are calling things out. So that phrase on the screen there, you know, like, I've never heard such a load of rubbish. I think we should live in a atmosphere where people can say that.
Yeah.
So you know, you talk. Is it a load of rubbish or not? Not like it's a load of rubbish or it's not. Which is again part of this time we're living in, isn't it? Of not discussing things, having things, the lid kept on things. So it's quite good that rubbish be called out if necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to have a
but isn't it
conversation.
interesting that we know who's in our community?
Yeah.
So I was saying
they're using their real names.
Yeah, they're using their real names.
Using your real name.
They're real photos. We know who's in our community and who's not.
Yeah.
And of course, in these sort of like global online communities, and you know, ours isn't so global today. I think, you know, the people that listen in after the show is global because we get a lot more Americans. But during the day, we tend to have people from the UK and Europe and Portugal. You know, obviously Portugal's in Europe. I mean, in fact, they're all in Europe, just not the EU. But yeah, so yeah, this does really also like correlate with online safety and our online experience and what people can do. I guess the internet has given narcissists a great new way to bully people. I'm sure dating sites have a lot of it. Anywhere where people are wanting to meet up for genuine connection is a place where somebody who has no empathy can run amok. Last couple of comments then from the audience, and then I'll throw last comment out to you guys as well, and then we'll wrap up. Sarah saying, I learned things always have a way of falling into place if we just get to a place where we can think for ourselves again, which is about the self-trust that you were talking about earlier, Rosanna. So maybe, you know, the next show is like regaining self-trust or something like that.
Yeah,
and then the Global Nobles, amazing show today. What a beautiful therapy session. Got to go catching a train to Queenborough.
Me too.
Excellent. Have a nice weekend there.
Take care. Safe journey.
And Rosanna, what's your final thought then on today's
show?
So
I think it's interesting that you were like, oh, we're getting really negative. I, from a higher perspective, believe that there is no sort of need to get all down in the dumps and like, oh my god, it's so awful, blah blah blah. There's immense growth to be had, coming from someone who experienced narcissistic abuse right from childhood, including sexual abuse, and ending up in 2 very abusively narcissistic marriages in different ways, and having come out of that, you know, gotten to a reasonable standard of healing myself, although I don't think that work ever gets to an end. As I opened the show with you, I said I really struggle with trusting others and trusting myself, and it is a journey, but at the same time, you know, there is so much gold to be found from my life, and elements of wisdom and understanding, and a growth in my own ability to have compassion and empathy, even for a narcissistic abuser, even for, you know, my sexual abuser, to understand it from a higher perspective, and pull in all that knowledge to be able to help heal individuals, and help them improve their own lives, because I have that greater understanding and can pass that on to the point where they can see it from a higher perspective. Because I think, you know, when we've experienced this kind of trauma, we can look at it from a really macro level, or we can zoom out and look at it from a micro level, or draw out and look at it from a macro level. And it's from that macro level that we not only understand more about the world and our place in it, but ourselves. And we can go through tumultuous shit, like absolutely be in the quagmire of the manure, and then realize that actually it's manure. You know, they threw me in a dark place, they wanted to bury me, but all I did was grow into a tree. You too, no matter where you are, what you've been through, you can grow in that tree. You can become that tree if you want to. If you want to take the nourishment from that shit If you want to find the diamonds, you can find the diamonds. You can become empowered by what you've been through. You can get to a point where you can say, right, I have lived a lot of shit, but there's also been sparkly goodness, and I can find the silver lining. And in that, even though then I couldn't trust myself, with all this knowledge, I've gotten to the point where I can trust myself more. And I've got through all of that. And I can trust that even if there's no one else ever in my life ever again that I can trust that I can get through that experience once again, because I did it before, and I'll do it now, and I'll do it tomorrow.
Beautiful.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's just incredible.
You're awesome.
You really are fantastic.
That is wonderful. That is so wonderful. I'm sorry if I have been a bit sort of gung ho and
Don't be silly. Don't ever apologise to me. I love it. Like, I'd love it if the trolls had got on board. I'm like, I'll take it. No, I love open discussion, and I think it's great if we disagree. As long as we can do it respectfully. And it's not to say that we did disagree. I think we have an awful lot in common, and I think we got that. We got to that point.
In a way, I'm sort of sorry, not sorry for being blokey. I just want to tell you what I think about this, and that.
Don't you ever apologise to me for being blokey.
But you understand what I'm saying. There's a time and a place, and things. And from what you said, this about whether we'd gone dark and gloomy and doomy. There isn't a right answer, is there? These things are a process. So, for example, it's very compassionate what you said about the people who perpetrate these things and wanting to understand them, because it can be both, can't it? And we can act as a community with this. It's like we want to show you, the men are about to show you their disgust with you, and it's going to hurt. And maybe other parts of our community are going to help you afterwards to get cured, to get healthy again with this. And it's like it can be a mix. There's not one right answer, is there? It's like we do need to show you how disgusting you are, and you need to hear it if you're doing these things, and we want to help you as well, because we want to see the end of it in our world. So it can be both things, can't it? And it can be different.
You can offer forgiveness, but still want there to be accountability. Because a lot of people misunderstand forgiveness. They think, well, if I forgive them, then I'm letting off the hook. If I'm forgiving them, then it's tantamount to condoning what they did. It absolutely isn't. And you're right. This and that can be true. Yeah, it can be
mad as fuck and compassionate as heaven at the same time. And if we act together, that's how we do it, isn't it? Because we're trying to, so many of these things we're trying to sort out as a single answer and as a single person, and we're forgetting that we've got such a resource in our collective. So thank you, Rosanna. I wasn't expecting that today. I never am with this flipping Barefoot Broadcast program.
Well, I think this is amazing.
Good, isn't it? I love the Barefoot Broadcast.
This has been really good. And look, we've got a flurry of new comments. Great show. Thanks, everyone. I look forward to your book, Rosanna.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, me too. I agree, Sarah. It would be amazing. Vivian saying, wonderful show. I'd never call you all kind of rubbish.
And it would be fine if you did.
Yeah, it would be. What an amazing way to explain that, Rosanna. That was just a moment ago. And then Sarah saying, Carl, where are you right now?
We're just very opened up by this process, And
his eyes are all moistened, aren't they?
But it's how I want to be. It's how I feel alive.
Yeah.
From acknowledging the darkness of this, but also seeing how possible it is to be free of it by us working together. I think it's a great place to be. Yeah. A break from the conspiracy of normality.
Well, I think this has been an amazing show. Thank you so much, Rosanna, for coming on. And we'll have to get a date in the diary for when you come back and talk about that.
Please. I love coming on.
And thank you, Carl, for joining us as well. I can see your mood.
I really love that you came on, Carl. And please never apologise for being blokey. We need more blokes who are prepared to stand up. And I just hate all this agenda about, trying to belittle men for being masculine. So be as masculine as you feel you need to be.
I will. First of all, I have to stop crying because that's so unmanly.
But that's not unmasculine.
No, I'm kidding. It was a joke.
We need to rephrase what it is to be masculine, I think.
Yeah. And it's ongoing.
Divine masculine
it's ongoing, and we'll keep talking about it for sure. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sarah's saying,
oh, me too. Pass the Bensons.
I almost feel like having a cigarette and Yeah, gold, Vivian's
Yeah.
saying. So anyway, on that bombshell, let's say goodbye to the Barefoot Broadcast this week. And we'll see you next week when we've got more amazing shows with amazing people. Thank you, Rosanna and Carl, and also to the audience, whether you listened in live today or later on in the day. Just have a fantastic weekend, and we hope to connect with you real soon. Lots of love from Portugal and from the UK.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.